In order to get started with Next.js and TypeScript, we'll first need to create our package.json, and we'll use that to implement it and set it to use all the defaults. After creating that, we'll need to install our dependencies, which in this case will be React, React DOM, and Next, which is the same as any other typical Next installation. These are all the minimum required dependencies for Next to work. Once that is complete, we will now install our dev dependencies, and these are our types package. So Next, React, and React DOM. You'll see that this mirrors the dependencies that we installed. We'll also need to install the Next plugin for TypeScript, and that's going to be spelled differently than zit. And then TypeScript itself to finish that off. So that completes all our dependencies. So now if we go to our package.json, you'll see that it creates a script section with just a test that will not work in its current format. So let's clear that out and create the scripts that we will need. So we're going to do 4 of them, and the first one will be dev for our local development setup, and this will just simply call next, which is defaults to running in dev mode. We'll then need to add a build command, which is simply next build. Start, which is for production mode, and that is next start. And then lastly, this one is unique to our setup. We want to add a type check to make sure that all our TypeScript is correct. The reason for this is because we're using Babel to compile our TypeScript, which is not to type checking. So we want an additional script here to check for that. And we're just going to call the TypeScript compiler, and that will be enough there to then output if there's any errors in that process. So that covers the entirety of our package.json. So now let's start on adding some of our config files that we need. So the first we're going to do here is we're going to update our Babel, and we're going to use the new Babel 7 config, which uses a JavaScript file instead of a JSON. So to do this, we need to add a module exports, as this is running in Node, and some presets. So we need the default one for Next, which is just Next Babel, and then add the Babel preset that was exported by the plugin for TypeScript. And that path is this. So once that is done, make sure you save that file. The next file that we need to create is our nextconfig.js. And in this one, we want to import the plugin and export that. And at this point, this is enough here for Next.js to work with TypeScript, but we're also going to add a tsconfig as well, so that TypeScript actually works in our editor as well, and so that our type check works too. So we're going to do this all by hand here instead of using the automated creator, as I like to type in the actual values that we need. So we're going to open up our compiler options, and let's go through each item one at a time. So let's always start with target, and it really doesn't matter here because we're not actually using TypeScript to compile our code, so it's just easier to go with ESNext. For our module system, we also want ESNext, especially if you want using dynamic imports, which Next.js supports. JSX, we want to do preserve, and the reason for it is 1, we're not using TypeScript to compile our JSX, and 2, if you do either React or React Native, TypeScript will require you to have a React import, which Next.js automatically adds for you. So Preserve is a lot easier to work with, as we can ignore the React import that's not needed with this. We're going to set a module resolution of node because it's a node project, and this just allows us to resolve index.ts and tsx files. We want to set allow synthetic default imports. So this allows us to import modules as default when they're not actually an ES module, such as React, for example. We're going to set no emit to true. That way we don't accidentally compile any of our TypeScript. We're going to set strict to true, so that will give us a lot of safety in our types. And we're going to set a few additional checks as well. So no unused local variables and no unused parameters. And that should look pretty good there on our TS config. So that's everything now for config. So let's actually get to coding of the project. So with Next.js, it has a pages directory in your root. So we will create that. And this is where all our pages go. And so the built-in Next.js router maps to files that are in this directory. So we're going to start off with just the most basic index.tsx. So we need to export default React component here, and then when we go to the root of our web page, Next.js will route to here. And let's do something really easy. So I like to give my pages a name of the name and then something page, as I find it easier to find it in the React DevTools. Then let's just do h1 and say hello next with TypeScript. And then we just need to export default that. And that's all we need there on the coding side. So let's go ahead and run this. So we can run this with npm run dev. And we now have that running on localhost 3000. So if we go here, we'll see that our page works. And just to double check that it works with hot modular loading, let's kind of move this off to the side. Let's add some more exclamation points, and how about some style as well? Make this red. And we see that that works there. So one more thing before we conclude this is let's add another page. And let's do one that uses a Next.js feature of get initial props, just to demonstrate that. So we're going to just create an about page. Make that really simple. And what's unique about this one is it's going to take a prop of name, and we're just going to define our type def right in line on this one. So name of string. Let's also render an h1. And we'll just say this page is about name. And export default about. So then if we go to about, we should see that page, but it's blinked there where name, because we have no prop being passed to that. And so we want here is we want to resolve this through a query variable. So if we do like name me, and then that would appear in there, or my name Jack, for example, and have that working. So to do that with Next.js, we can use the get initial props. And with recent versions of TypeScript, you can actually just declare these functions right on that value, and it should just work. So we're going to resolve a query, which is passed to every single Next.js get initial props function. And then we also need to give it the next context. So that's a type that is passed to the initial props. And that is from next context. Okay. let's see, what are we missing here? I think we can just create the function now. So we have the query, which is a type record, and then we want to return that prop name. So what we return from here is then passed to about, and then it's query name. And simple enough, and we have that there. Now, one thing we are missing, and we do have to refresh for this to work, and that does work now, is that we see name is it is a plain type string. If you want to, you could like define a fixed type on it. And the way to do that is through next context. And we can set a fixed type on there. That way it's just not a plain record. So we can do name string. So now if I was to misspell this, we would get an error on that. Excellent, that all works there. So I hope that all helps out there with setting up NextJS with TypeScript.